All right, we're going to roll straight into questions here with Brad. We'll take as many questions as we can in the time that we have, and I'll start with Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
What about Bob? Come on, Bob.
Good morning. After the penalty issue today, and maybe after your meeting today, do you have a clear idea of what you can do intentionally versus unintentionally, and how much you can say about that?
You're talking about the Denny Hamlin penalty, like the wreck thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Clear idea? I don't know. I honestly haven't even thought about it, Bob. Generally wrecking somebody on purpose will get you in trouble, but not always. So I don't know if I have a clear answer, but it's not something that I really concern myself with.
All right, we'll go to Jordan.
The Athletic, you and RFK Racing had your run-ins with NASCAR last year over modifying third-party parts. This week, Hendrick had its issues. From your perspective, one, what did you think of the penalties and how NASCAR handling this? Two, they contend that it's an issue with the supplier issue. From an owner's perspective, you guys have had that as well.
Yeah, and have not seen the parts that came off the Hendrick cars. I'm not educated enough to say, hey, they did this and shouldn't have, or I understand they should have. So I can really only speak to ours. And, the penalty we had last year was about a year from this week. It was tough, right? Immediate emotions are to be frustrated and angry. I don't feel that way today. In fact, when I saw NASCAR a couple weeks ago, we had a car get inspected after Daytona. I made a comment to him, and honestly, I told him thank you. It was one of the best things that ever happened to us. We came out of it better. It was good for the industry. From our perspective, it changed our culture inside the company to where we had better behaviors. And I thought it set a tone for the industry. Again, I can't speak for Hendrick, but with our issues. And so, I think I made a few comments a month later to Claire or somebody else about the importance of penalties in the garage, like that they serve a purpose, and I think it's really easy, and I've fallen victim to this as well, to look at NASCAR as the boogeyman, but in a lot of ways they're trying to help us. They're trying to help the sport and make sure that it can be healthy. And whether or not the NASCAR's right or Hendrick's right with their penalty, I don't know to that specific situation, but as a whole, I do understand the inclination and the emotion behind the teams and maybe the fans getting fired up over a penalty, but in the end, penalties are there for a reason. They're there to make this circus somewhat manageable and sustainable. So, as to what ends up happening with Hendrick and all that, I can't speak to it, again, not knowing enough. But from my perspective, I lived it, and I'm probably at 180 of where I was a year ago on it, and I understand it at a high degree. Yeah, there's always a part somewhere that's not what you want it to be. And there's a portal that NASCAR has to submit those parts to, and there's usually some dialogue and communication around that. Generally speaking, I feel like NASCAR has been amenable to work through those and has gotten significantly better over the last year. We have parts here and there that are issues, and NASCAR has come up and said, hey, you can do this or you can't do it. It's really more or less about the communication with them. No problem, Jordan.
All right, we're going to go to Lee, and then if I can get a microphone to Dustin, please, up front. Go ahead, Lee.
You've shown that you've had speed this year. My question is, what do you have to do to get better results from the speed that you have? I'm sure you dissect it a lot more than we have time to during the week. So what do you feel like it might be missing?
Yeah, we haven't got the finishes, but we certainly ran really respectably, and it's been a number of different things. At Daytona, we got caught up in a wreck, and I didn't really feel like there was anything we could do differently there. Las Vegas, I felt like we had a pretty strong run going, and it kind of fell apart with some different things that happened towards the end of the race with restarts and pit road, and then Phoenix, we had an issue with the car at the end. So it's been a mixed bag of everything, to be honest, but. Probably the only race I feel like we got the finish we deserved was Fontana. But along the way, thank God for stage points. We've been able to score a lot of those that have propped us up in the points and put us in a good position. But I would rather be, running well and not getting the finishes we want than running bad and, kind of picking off the bottom with some finishes at the end. So that's the bright side, and I'm confident we just keep running well. We'll get the finishes we deserve over time. It just hasn't happened yet.
And for someone who was here in 2010 and someone who was at Gateway, weeks later, what, the kind of the shock and awe of what we saw here in Atlanta, what's it going to take, do you think, with Denny and Chastain to kind of stop the madness? Because what did it take with you and Carl that finally stopped what was going on between you two before somebody gets hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I really have an answer as to what it takes. NASCAR, I can only speak to my own personal experience. NASCAR came in and had the sit-downs and all those things, and those were helpful, I think. But as a whole, it kind of worked its way out over time, I think more so because the power dynamics shifted, and my team was running well every week, and at that time Carl's team started to perform less well. We just didn't run around each other. I think that probably has as much effect as anything. But as far as Denny and Ross, I think they have to figure that out, and if NASCAR gives them a helping hand here and there, then I don't see where that's a bad thing. But ultimately, I feel like the line is when your issues with each other start affecting others. That's a pretty clear line to me. If that's, hey, you guys are wrecking each other and taking half the field with you and things of that nature. I think generally that's a pretty good line that NASCAR has held over the years. Don't know if that's the line now or not. I think it's probably better for them to answer, but it seems like one that has the most precedent. No problem, Lee.
All right, Dustin, go ahead.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. I know, as you mentioned, the penalties about a year ago, but what did you learn going through the appeal process, and do you look back and think about things you guys, having gone through that, maybe could have done something different to have a better result? Yeah,
I mean, the appeal process, honestly, I thought it was more fair than I anticipated. It was a pretty fair process. I can't say there was a key learning about the process itself. The learnings were more introspective, more about us as a company and who we are and what our culture was. And that's why I made the comment I made just a minute ago. It was one of the best things that ever happened to us, because it forced us to look within and improve ourselves.
You guys just got out of a meeting that was originally scheduled for half an hour that went an hour. How comfortable are you with how these meetings are going, and how much of how open are these meetings since it's just you guys?
Well, drivers always have a lot to say, so it's never a shocker when a meeting lasts longer than it's supposed to.
Yeah, but drivers like to be somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, some of them do. Some of them just like to talk a lot. I've probably fallen victim to that every once in a while, but no, I think it's productive that the industry as a whole in different sections is collaborating at higher levels than ever before. It's not just the driver group. I see it with the owners as well. And I'm sure there's probably other factions that I'm omitting, but it takes a lot to put on one of these races. You got drivers, you got teams, you got sponsors, you got the sanctioning body, you got rights holders, you got you guys with the media, and we're facing different times now than in the past, just by the nature of time. And I think we're all trying to optimize the industry over the realities of today. Some are better than what they were in the past, some are worse. And in order to do that, we need everybody's brain power and trust. And so those sessions are really reflective of, how do we put together the best ideas and make them actionable.
All right, we're going to go to Jim. Kelly, did you have a question? Okay, and then Jim and Kelly. Jim, right here.
What's up, Jim?
Jim Utter, motorsport.com. I was just curious, little self-evaluation, have you noticed that how much your perspective has changed in general by adding on some of these issues, many of which we've discussed already this morning, by adding the owner hat to the driver hat?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, I sit in different meetings than I sat in before, and I'm enjoying it. The rewards for being a driver owner are much higher, but so are the penalties of bad days. But I enjoy having a deeper role in the sport. I find more meaning in it. I feel like I have more purpose as a person, and that's something I'm taking satisfaction out of. And at the end of the day, it does give a perspective that it can be helpful if used in the right ways. And I'm trying to be cognizant of that and what that will require out of me and in the right environments. But as a whole, I think certainly I would agree that I have a different perspective now, Jim.
All right, Kelly. I'll work my way around the room. Hang tight.
Two things, Brad. First off, have you had any feedback or anything that you've brought up to NASCAR? They're supposed to reevaluate the longer restart zone this weekend. Have you thought about it during these races? Has it been a big deal or good or bad for you?
I haven't really noticed a difference, to be honest. I'm pretty neutral on it. I think there was a thought that initially it would help, get rid of some of the rock, paper, scissors restarts, and give the leader a little better advantage. I don't know if that's really played out over the last few weeks. Maybe it would with time, but I don't know if anyone's really seen anything that could prove or disprove that. So I don't have a real strong opinion right now, Kelly.
And then going back to your performance, as you said, the results haven't been there, but after 3 weeks on the West Coast, does it seem like you guys are getting better at figuring out what you need, what you want in this car, and kind of just honing in on that?
Yeah, 100%. I think our people, our tools, and everything that we're working with has gotten significantly better, and we've been able to apply those in ways that we weren't previously able to, and that's showing results on the track. So we're not where we want to be. We want to be dominating races. You want to be having races where you lead the most laps, and although we were able to do that at Daytona, we haven't done that since. But we are, solid in the top 10. Our average running position really shows that. And that's, again, certainly massive progress from where we were last year. Last year we came to tracks like Phoenix or even a track like here at Atlanta, and I felt like we were, consistently 3 to 5 tenths off. And now it feels like we're, half a tenth to a tenth off of where we need to be able to dominate races, which, that's a really significant improvement. But it's not our goal. Our goal is to be where we have race-winning speed week in and week out. The last bit of that is the hardest part, but at least we can say we've taken a little bit away from it.
All right, we have one final question. Apologies, I won't get to everyone with the time that we have with Brad. Go ahead with your question.
Blake Smith, ESPN Radio, Owensboro. Brad, evaluate the downforce package from last week and how much that changed in the preseason test that you took part in.
Yeah, Blake, I enjoyed the race last week from the perspective of how hard the car was to drive. I thought that was a massive gain. Here in the Cup Series, when I first came to the Cup Series, these were some of the hardest cars that I've ever drove in my life. In fact, they were the hardest car I'd ever drove in my life. You would come off the corners and they would wiggle and they'd wobble and they'd be really out of control, and you'd spin the tires, and you'd drive back down in the next corner and you'd about back it in the fence. And then over time, the cars had gotten easier to drive. And I think some of that was gaining experience as a driver, but probably the reality is that most of it was from the cars just, over time developing into a series where they were easier to drive by the specs that NASCAR allowed us to utilize. So as that's progressed, I feel like over the last 2 or 3 years specifically, the cars on the short tracks had just turned into cars that were too easy to race, too easy to drive, and not becoming of what we would expect a Cup Series level driver to have to endure. So the step last week was really a big step at getting the Cup level cars to where they're difficult and challenging to drive, and really take advantage of the level of driver we expect to have in the Cup Series to be able to drive these cars. The car that we raced last week, if I put a local short track vet in it from anywhere in America, he would probably struggle to drive it. He would probably spin out on corner exit. He would probably have a handful of problems with it. The cars that we had with the downforce package before that, I feel like I could take any local short track driver in the country, put them in there, and they'd probably get in a good car and run pretty well. And that's not what we want at this level. That's not what I think is indicative of what our fans and our sport has as an interest for what drivers should be at this level. So I think in that sense, last week was a significant gain. that we can kind of hang our hat on. As to whether we saw that, the amount of side-by-side racing that we would like to see, or the fall off and things that we'd like to see of the cars, I think that's probably largely debatable. But the other, piece of this is not that the cars need to be hard to drive. You should not be able to go from a local short track or the truck series and get in a cup car and be immediately successful. It should challenge you in new and more difficult ways. And so last week was a big gain in that fashion that I think is important to our sport and our industry.
All right, Brad, thank you again for hustling in here and for spending
Thank you.
some time with
Take
us.
care, guys.
We appreciate it.
No problem.
We'll work to bring up William Byron.